Today we're talking about solar panels and how to install them on your boat. Don't worry, it's a moderately difficult job. The solar panel, or to use its proper name, photovoltaic panel, is a module that contains several solar cells made from a semiconductor like silicon. These cells simply absorb sunlight and convert it into electrical energy. When many of these cells are wired together, that's when we talk about a module or photovoltaic panel, the solar panel. In reality, solar panels on boats are a necessity for anyone who wants to spend their vacations independently, without running the engine, and above all, without having to stop at the harbor every night to recharge their batteries. With the advent of new solar technologies, everyone can afford a small solar charging system at a relatively low cost. So let's see together how to create one. If you pay attention, photovoltaic module installations tend to favor places with a certain tilt, like the roofs of houses, or large open spaces where you can mount the panels on supports that follow the movement of the sun. This is to squeeze the most out of the system. Both of these solutions aim for full exposure of the modules. In other words, they're never placed where shade can reach them, which is the biggest enemy of solar panels, as you can easily imagine. So let's be honest, it's exactly for these reasons. Sailboats are actually the least suitable place to decide to install a series of wide, flat photovoltaic panels. Deciding where to place the panels even before buying them is essential. You should choose the spot on the boat that gets the most sun exposure. Usually we're talking about the cockpit, the arch, the star arch. It's definitely the best spot, especially if your boat already has one. There are many advantages, not least the fact that they can also be mounted on adjustable brackets to follow the sun, even though in reality the installation becomes a bit more fragile. And honestly, I've never seen anyone do it. Adjust the panels while underway. That said, here the panels will definitely be in the shade. Now let's move on to the positions on the fabrics. There are all sorts of schools of thought, and ideas vary both on the position and on the mounting. Some people place them on the Dodger, others on the Bimini. I prefer the second option because the boom rarely passes over the bimini, so there's less shade compared to the spray hood, which is located right under the boom. The panels to be installed in this case will be flexible or semi-flexible. If, as on many small boats, none of these structures are present, we can create brackets to attach the panels to the lifelines or to the pulpit. It's a solution I've tried, but I can't really recommend it. It's not particularly convenient, and especially when docked, the panels can be a bit of a nuisance. As the last option, and definitely the one I recommend the least, there's the deck. This is a dangerous solution for the crew while sailing, and should only be considered as a last resort. They make non-slip panels specifically for the deck. The panels can be fastened with self-locking fasteners, with screwed-on Velcro, or glued directly. The last recommendation I can give you is to make sure you allow air to circulate underneath the panel. This way, you'll prevent it from overheating and losing a large percentage of its energy production. You should know that it's not enough to just buy high-quality components to ensure good system performance. You also need to install them properly. Now I'll explain how you should assemble your system using this setup I've already prepared specifically for this video. First of all, we obviously have the solar panel. This one has a power of 20 watts with its positive and negative terminals. On the back here, I've already attached the charge controller that converts the panel's energy into a charge our battery can use. In this case, it's a 12-volt, 14-ampere battery. There are different inputs for the cables. You'll need to identify the icons and connect the cables accordingly. Positive and negative from the panel to the controller, and positive and negative from the controller to the battery. On the controller, you'll also find a spot to wire a load directly. Now let's point it toward the sun and check the display to make sure the controller is charging. There you go. As you can see, everything works just fine. The first thing we'll look at in our system is the panel itself. As mentioned before, there are different types and different functions. Rigid, semi-flexible, flexible, and monocrystalline, polycrystalline, and thin film. On a boat, just like in any other field, you should prioritize build quality. Monocrystalline, flexible, and walkable panels are excellent and don't cost much more than panels with lower performance. 100 watts? 200 watts? It's a matter of size. Choose the ones that best fit the spot you dig. And how many should you get? You need to calculate the consumption of your devices and act accordingly. For example, I have 4 100-watt panels that can produce about 200 amps per day of grid. And for my energy needs, that's enough. I use 2 computers, recharge camera batteries, lights, and whatever else without worrying too much about draining the batteries. The charge controller. As it happens, the controller regulates and normalizes the charge going to the batteries, disconnecting them once they're fully charged. Here too, the choices are endless. However, there are 2 categories of products, PWM and MPPT. Without getting into metaphysical discussions about their functions, the first is more affordable. The second is less affordable, but much more effective. They range from handling 10A up to 100A and beyond. I use a simple calculation based on the wattage of the solar panels to figure out which one to install. Each 100-watt panel produces about 5 amps. At about 30%, just like you do when calculating extra fuel for routes. Knowing this, you'll see that a 10-amp controller can definitely handle a 100-watt panel. And then just go by multiples. Also, pay attention to which batteries the charge controller is designed for, and buy one that matches the batteries you have or plan to install. I also recommend not placing the controller more than 2 meters away from the batteries. Otherwise, you'll need to increase the cable gauge. You might be tempted to think that a red cable is just a red cable and a black cable is just a black cable. That's true, but not all cables are the same. Our system is actually made up of 2 separate systems. Each consists of 2 100-watt solar panels in series, which go to a controller and then, as mentioned, to the batteries. The cable gauge I used is 6 millimeters. If you only wanted a single 100-watt panel, you could even use a 4mm cable. You should keep in mind that the longer the cables, the greater the potential loss or reduction in power. So try not to run cables back and forth across the hull. Instead, plan your system to be compact and smart. Again, don't skimp on the cable because the overall quality of your system depends on it. The connectors. MC4 connectors are the right choice for your system. They're waterproof and weather resistant. Use them instead of making makeshift connections. We'll talk in detail about batteries and how to choose them in a future video. For now, let's assume you already have at least one battery with adequate amperage to connect your panel to. Without getting into complicated explanations, we can say that if there's a risk of frequent shading on one or more panels, a certain installation is better. Parallel, because if they're wired in series, shading on a single panel will drag down the output of all the others in that series. Series wiring increases the voltage, but the current stays the same, and vice versa with parallel wiring. In this case, I wired the solar panels in series, but if you wanted to wire them in parallel, I highly recommend getting a multi-way connector for a cleaner installation. It's possible. At this point, we're total experts in solar systems, so let's go ahead and install our whole setup directly on the boat. As I mentioned before, every system has many possible variations. So in this specific case, here's what I'm going to do. I'm installing the solar panels on the bimini. Since there are 4 panels, I tee 2 identical strings and arrange them so I can wire them together in series with a positive and a negative. Once they're wired, I move on to securing the cables and running them all the way to our controller, making a hole in the deck. Always pay attention to where you drill and how you plan to make the hole watertight. You might already have a setup for this, so check. Usually it's near the pulpit. I run the cables to the controller and connect the respective ends to the positive and negative terminals assigned on the controller. After that, I take the positive and negative directly to the batteries. Once the installation is finished, we need to test everything. If you're at anchor, turn off the engine and relax, while the main source of clean energy in our solar system gives you a bit of battery juice at a time. While you're recharging the batteries, you can always recharge yourself in the sun too. See you in the next video, and fair winds. Not too little, not too much, but just right.